Hi, I'm Colin.
And I'm Phil.
We're the hosts of Science Fiction 101.
It's a show which gets to the heart of science fiction. Books, films, TV. We've covered Star Trek,
Doctor Who,
Star Wars.
We love to explore the past, present, and future of science fiction.
And we'd love for you to join us
on Science Fiction 101.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Colin. We're recording this in July 2024, and I believe you've just had some kind of Independence Day, Colin?
We celebrated that last night, and then some people continued to celebrate it until 2 or 3 a.m.
Well, we had a similar thing in the UK, although it didn't really begin until the 5th, which was when we found that we have a new party in power for the first time in 14 years. So that's a bit of a big deal.
Oh, well, I hope that everything goes well for you guys.
I hope so. Last episode, of course, we talked about John Wyndham, and I was very pleased with the response that we got. So many people got in touch to tell us that they too enjoyed John Wyndham, or that they'd been on a binge of Wyndham because of our intention to cover him. So that was really very pleasing. Just a couple of choice comments that we received. Damo said, "The parts of triffids or cuckoos that describe the English countryside are wonderfully written, and the depiction of the early lives of the children in the chrysalids and their repressive society are outstanding." And then he goes on to say that Wyndham comes across as very English, and only someone from his background could say that one of his own stories frightened him pallid. That was from the interview clip that I played of John Wyndham, where he said, "Oh yes, I once frightened myself pallid with one of my horror stories." We also heard from Andy, who joined in on the debate on whether it's Kraken, 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 whatever. Andy says surely it's pronounced Kraken. He wondered if maybe there's a sort of a north-south divide in the UK. Like, I don't know if you know, in the south of England, where I come from, people say, "I'm going to have a bath." But in the north of England, people say, "I'm going to have a bath." Andy also likes the chrysalids and midwich cuckoos and the triffids. But he says, "You never mentioned Webb." Now, Webb is one of the posthumous Wyndham novels. Have you ever read Webb?
No.
No, so we're missing out on that one. My impression from reviews that I remember reading in the past is that it's probably not one of his greatest works. And I've stayed away from it because it's posthumous, and it made me think, well, maybe this isn't a book that Wyndham really wanted published, or maybe he hadn't even finished it. But one day I shall catch up with that one. We also heard from Linda, who said, "I finished Triffids." And then she says, "I feel like he, i.e. Wyndham, let me down with the Triffids. All that about how they're communicating by rattling their sticks, how they must be sentient, social, intelligent. I was hoping that plucky Dennis would find a way to communicate with them, maybe even work out a peace treaty. But no, let's just blow them away." And then you replied something to the effect that it can be hard to communicate with other beings when their goal is to kill you and use you for sustenance. So lots of great conversation on John Wyndham, and as I've said, that's really pleasing. It's a bit like when we did some James White, which is probably maybe 2 years ago now. We didn't expect really to get much response because I didn't think anyone read James White, but loads of people said, "Hey, I've read James White and he's great." So yeah, terrific. We must dig out some relatively obscure female writers because we've done lots of these dead old white guys, but we need to mix things up a bit. So
yeah, we still need a topic for next month, if I remember right.
I think we do.
Although intensive reading, I think I'm starting to slow down because between our podcast, the Take Me to Your Reader podcast, and my Hugo voting preparation, I have been going through book after book after book after book after book.
Getting a bit much, is it?
A little bit. Maybe I should start watching the long form presentations just to take a break.
Speaking of Hugos, That's going to be our main topic this episode, is reviewing the short story nominees for the Hugo Awards. For those who don't know, the Hugo Awards are a popularity contest which are one of the big features of the World Science Fiction Convention every year. So they're voted for by members of the convention, and anyone can become a member simply by spending money. And Colin, I believe you are a voting member of this year's worldcon.
I am, yeah. My friend Seth has been nominated 2 years in a row for a Hugo, and he's planning on going this year. And James and I are planning on going with him. And we're going to have some individual adventures. We're going to have some mutual adventures. I might wander down south, further into the United Kingdom, and talk to a noted podcaster in the Birmingham area. All kinds of interesting things can happen.
Yeah, could be fun. So let's dig into these Hugo stories then.
Yes.
So 6 stories. 4 of them are from the English-speaking world, and 2 of them are from China. Now, not to prejudge the quality of the stories or anything, but I think it's fair to say that the main reason there are 2 Chinese stories on the ballot is because last year's convention was held in China. And so there will be a lot of people who attended last year's convention who will have chosen to become voting members this year, even if they're not physically attending the convention.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these, even in the age of the internet, science fiction is still kind of siloed into various places, and we just don't have good exposure to the non-Western world sources of science fiction. For example, there's no Russian science fiction on here. Despite the presence of, I know there's Filipino science fiction writers, because we read one of their stories a couple of years ago in our January review. So I think because it's a popularity contest, unless it's in media that people are experiencing on a regular basis easily, then we don't see it at the Hugo level.
Sure. I don't know if you have any preference as to which story to begin with.
Oh, let's start hard and then make it easy.
Okay. Choose a hard one then.
The Mausoleum's Children by Aliette de Bedard.
Yeah, I found that a hard story as well.
We're talking about definitely a science fiction level world where a whole bunch of spaceships have crashed onto a planet, and the people on that planet, who are presumably us, are mining it for technology and ideas. And there has arisen a culture of the people that work inside of the ships that are controlling all that, the people that they oversee and dominate to try and do it, and then all the rest of the world. And our main character is someone who has escaped from that cult. Almost, yeah, I think cult's the right word for it. And now wants to go back into the combined ships to try and get her friends out.
I think you have summarized the story better than the story itself summarizes itself. I took several pages of reading this to sort of gradually build up a picture of what was going on. And even when I knew what was going on, I was kind of thinking, yeah, so where are we going with this? What's this really going to be about? And it wasn't really till about the halfway point that I actually started to find the story engaging. One of the things I found troubling with this is, for all the fine language that's being used to describe everything, I didn't have a very clear picture of what this mausoleum was. The word mausoleum suggests a building. Most of the description of it tended to suggest spaceship, because it was talking about all these different ships that had been merged together. And then the people who live, work inside this mausoleum are described as having cables and ports in their bodies, and they become part of it. They're sort of attached to it. So the image in my mind inevitably was the Borg and a Borg cube and that kind of thing from Star Trek. So I struggled to picture what this was supposed to be and where this was supposed to be. Are we on another planet? Is this on Earth? None of it felt quite clear enough.
Yeah, and the resolution at the very end. So our main character goes in against the advice of the person that helped her go out, and finds that her friends, who were subjugated by the masters, have become the masters, and she helps another young girl escape.
Yeah.
And they talk about their shared experiences where, everyone was always trying to reach the computer intelligences inside of the ships. Mm-hmm. And there's a suggestion that at the very end that they might have, and there's an anger about how their ships are being used in ways they didn't like, but it's all very vague. It could be a very realistic thing because having leaving, since they're going to leave the ship, and they think they do leave the ship, you wouldn't know what continues to happen inside the ship. And so yeah, it's very vague, very open-ended.
The one thing that maybe redeems it a little bit for me is the fact that the central character has already been hunted down and badly injured at the beginning of the story, and you kind of feel that inevitably the same thing's going to happen at the end, and more or less it does. The same character is hunted again at the end. So there's a kind of an inevitability about it, which I felt was fine. But I did wonder, is this really a chapter from a novel? So I don't know if we should ask which story or stories you are voting for in the Hugos, but do you care to comment on that?
I like some of the other stories better than this one.
Right, that's a very good answer.
And if the Locust magazine is any indication of what we might see in the Hugos, the story "How to Raise a Kraken in Your Bathtub" by P. Jelly Clark is likely to be up there as well. I do like Naomi Kritzer's writing an awful lot. I want to abstract that out and vote for the best story rather than the best author.
And of course, that's one of the issues with a popularity contest, is that occasionally people win it because they are popular, not because the work is any good. We often see Hugo winners that are the usual suspects, if you like.
Yes. Well, and I noticed that this year there are several people who are nominated in multiple categories, which means in the last year they've had multiple published works. Yeah. Naomi Kritzer is nominated for Best Short Story, Best Novelette, and the Lodestar Award, I believe, for her novel Liberty's Daughter.
And you've had to read all of these other works as well, presumably.
I have, and I enjoyed them all.
Oh, good.
Her works in particular.
Yeah.
I've read How to Raise a Kraken in Your Bathtub by P. Jelly Clark, and also his Lodestar nominated novel A Benny's Song, which is a wonderful, I don't want to call it young adult, but it's just like definitely aimed at younger readers. Epic fantasy set in an African environment instead of the standard, Western French British environment like you would see.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I loved that. It was very enjoyable.
Okay. So, shall we move on to another story?
Yeah. Let's talk about Angela's Journey by Han Song.
Okay.
So this is one of our Chinese pieces. It was published in Adventures in Space, New Short Stories by Chinese and English science fiction writers, which I believe is an anthology. Mm-hmm. Do you want to have a shot at giving us a summary?
Yeah. I'm just trying to find it in my notes. This is my summing up of it. Creature and another of its kind, known as Same Kind, find themselves they know not where. They are apparently on a spaceship, but without any controls, and they basically spend the story debating their purpose and wondering over who the third is, because they notice there are 3 seats in the control room, and there's only 2 of them, and they figure, well, there must be a third. And so they go through this round of suspicion and paranoia of, is there somebody else on this ship hiding from us? Is one of us concealing something from the other? So there's a whole load of suspicion and paranoia and constant debate because these characters have woken up from a coma with no memories. They don't know where they are. They don't know where they're going, what their purpose is. So that's the kind of the literal level of the story. And then as a spoiler, because I don't think you can really talk about what the story is about without the spoiler, unfortunately. The spoiler is Creature ends up killing Same Kind. So Creature is the only living being at the end of the story. Now, do you have an answer, Colin, for who the third is? Because I think I do.
Oh, you do?
I think so.
Huh. I think the story stayed true to its title.
Answerless Journey.
Answerless Journey. Yeah. Much like the story that we just talked about, this story drops you into the middle of a situation.
Yeah.
And there's really I didn't feel like there was a resolution to it. So I'm curious to find out what you came across.
I may be totally wrong, but the final chapter of the story, it's broken up into about 4 or 5 chapters, each with a little heading. And the last one is called something like The Mystery of Sex. And Creature has killed Same Kind, and then the story tells us that Creature notices something about I can't remember whether it says the sex of Same Kind or whether it says gender. I think it says sex. And so what I put 2 and 2 together is what they hadn't realised is that they were a mating pair, one male, one female, and the third would have been their offspring. But they didn't know about sex, so they spent their whole time at each other's throats. One of them ends up dead. They now cannot mate or breed. There will be no offspring. They're kind of doomed. So that's my interpretation of what the third would have been. The third seat is for the next generation that they would have produced had they figured it out. Does that make any sense?
I think that does make some sense.
Phew.
I'm left with questions like, there's not a good description of the passing of time.
No.
And also in that last chapter, and in some preceding chapters, there's a discussion about the rate at which food is disappearing.
Oh, yes, there is. Yes.
And so I'm wondering, and to be honest, there's hints that they might be humans.
Yes.
But it's never conclusively said.
That's right.
So, if you think ahead 9 months, would there be enough food to support a family of 2 or 3?
Yeah, that's something that puzzled me even before I sort of made that conclusion of the third is supposed to be the next generation. And I do wonder what's been lost in translation here. I believe it was translated by a human who is named, but even so, I think there is some lack of subtlety in some of the English in the version that we've read, and I wonder therefore if we've lost something.
Yeah. One of the things that I love about this story is how it evokes the sense of the other or the alien in the way it is written, because there's so few details. It's really about the discussions between Same Kind and Creature.
Yes.
And because they aren't ever humanized and you don't ever become close to them, I felt like I was reading a story about aliens from the aliens' perspective, which I thought was really well done.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Again, I don't know if this is the intent, but it seems very heavily metaphorical. Although they think they're on a spaceship, they say there are no controls. So it made me think, well, no, they're not on a spaceship, really. They're just in the world. You could say we are traveling, you and I, we're traveling through space. We look out the window, we see the stars, we're traveling through space. But where are the controls? There are no controls. So the whole thing could be a metaphor just for being alive, for existing. Rather than being literally about aliens on a spaceship going from A to B. And I think it works on both of those levels. And I think that makes it a good story.
Well, and the suspicion that comes up between them, because the food does seem to be going away at an odd rate.
Yes.
At one point, Creature thinks she is being observed by the third.
Yes.
And she runs to go find Same Kind, and Same Kind isn't in his room, and then he shows up. And I say he just because I think that's what I assigned to them. It isn't really described that way at all.
That's right.
But then the very opposite happens. Creature begins watching Same Kind because of suspicion, and then Same Kind catches her doing that, and then they fight. She wins. He dies. She eats him. Yeah. It's a boy meets girl, girl meets boy, girl eats boy kind of story.
But boy doesn't necessarily know what a girl is, and vice versa.
Yeah, and I can have that completely backwards, aside from the eating part.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the cartoon strip Strange Planet by Nathan Pyle?
Oh, yes, I am.
I was a bit reminded of that because of the way these creatures talk to each other. I've called up one strip from Strange Planet. Anyone who doesn't know, this is a little 4-panel comic strip that Nathan Pyle does, and he has these sort of blue aliens, and they talk to each other about very mundane things, but in a quite stilted way because they're aliens. So the one I've called up has just got the two of them talking to each other, sort of "How are you?" kind of conversation, and the conversation goes, "Greetings, being. How are you? Could be inferior, and how are you? I can imagine my situation deteriorating, but I am trying not to dwell on that. It requires mental discipline. Hope you can properly balance hypothetical futures. You too, my friend." So there's that kind of stilted language as these innocent creatures try to make sense of the world. And that's what this story reminded me of.
Yes. Yeah, evoking that sense of other.
Yeah.
So, and most of the things they deal with are things we deal with every day in Strange Planet. Like, we consume jitter liquid.
Yes.
and cats seem to be a universal constant.
Fantastic. So, Answerless Journey. If I were voting for the Hugos, I mean, there's a lot to like about that story, but I don't think it's quite good enough for me to be a Hugo winner, so I don't think I would vote for it.
Now, the Hugo voting style is ranked choice.
Okay.
I wonder, when you say the words, you wouldn't vote for it. One of the things you can't put into your vote is the item no vote or no award.
Yeah.
And I think you would rate it above no award.
Oh, I would, yes. I definitely would rank it, yes. Maybe when we get to the end of discussing these, I might think about what my ranking order would be, but that wouldn't be my top pick.
Yeah.
What's next?
I think the next one would have to be The Sound of Children Screaming by Rachel K. Jones.
Okay.
Now, this story, it's pretty unique because it does not come from a classic science fiction or fantasy magazine. It comes from a horror magazine. And given the topic, given the content and the theme, I think it's really appropriate for it to be there. Although it is certainly it's a fantasy story without a doubt. Yeah. And it might be science fictional because there are a lot of real world elements to it.
Yes. Do you want to have a go at summarizing it?
Oh, I will, but it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
There is an elementary school teacher in her classroom, and she gets the notification that there is a shutdown because there's a shooter inside the school, and they begin to hear the sound of screaming and gunshots. And so she urges the children into a safety area, and in that area, there's a magic doorway. And they go through a doorway into a land that reminds one of Narnia pretty strongly, just to give people a reference. Except that in this land, the Narnians, who are all mice, are at war with one another, and the children are taken advantage of to wield weapons in the mouse's war that will eventually be at the cost of her own lives. And the teacher is put in this situation where she recognizes this right away because the mice alienate the children from her by this seducing from power. And she has to make a decision between trying to tell the children the truth, maybe going along with the mice in their war, or to save the children from what will happen to them there is to take them back through the door into the real world and potentially face the shooter.
Yeah.
And it is... it's bleak, it's stark, it is gut-wrenching in the choices that she has to make and what the children go through. It reminds me a lot of Rabbit Test from last year.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
We talked about how in the first couple of stories, there doesn't really seem to be a point. We're brought into a scene and we live the scene with the people there. If you use the label message fiction, which I realize can be a little offensive, this is definitely message fiction. It's talking about the lack of safety for people due to the gun fetish in the United States.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you describe it the way that you did. It is a difficult one to summarize because, well, it's two stories. It's this ultra-real, this is the world in which we live at the beginning and the very end of the story. But in between times, it's this world that could be very twee, with its little mouse king and all of that. And I actually found that middle section a little bit troubling because of that, because it felt twee. Now, I know that the lives of the kids were at risk in that section. So I think the story does well to get that idea across. And it makes the middle section quite real in the same way that the Narnia books and the Narnia movies make Narnia quite real.
It is.
But at no point did I really feel that it was real. It only really became real for me when I realised that there was a dilemma for the teacher. She had to choose between one of two unpalatable alternatives. That's when it became real for me. But for most of it was they're in this place where there are castles and mice and sword fights and whatnot. So I wasn't terribly convinced by that, particularly given the very stark opening of it. Guns, or the gun, as the story sort of refers to them, the gun is presented as if it's a force of nature. And I think that's so well done in this story. It really gets across this idea that, well, there's nothing we can do about guns, so instead we've got to have bulletproof vests for all the kids. We've got to have these bulletproof shelters that they can go into. So the whole premise of the United States approach to guns is that guns are untouchable. You can change everything else, and you must change everything else in the world, but don't you dare go near the guns. Now, to the rest of the world, that seems crazy. What we do is we notice that guns are very dangerous things, and we absolutely restrict them. It's very difficult to get a gun in the UK. It is possible, and we do occasionally have crazy shooters, but we have them like once every 20 or 30 years, whereas in the States, we know you have them once every 20 or 30 weeks.
We have them 2 to 3 times per week.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. That is horrible. But the way this story perceives what the problem is, I think, is terrific. I'm just let down by the middle bit, which seems too twee. I do wonder to what extent this story is, shall we say, culturally specific. Because although I think it's doing very well to identify a problem in the world, it's not actually a problem in the world, it's a problem in one country in the world. It's a bit like if you read a Chinese story and the story is dealing with something that is very specifically Chinese, it may have less appeal to the broader readership.
Yeah. The thing about the problem with the guns in the United States is that it makes local news all the time. It makes national news half of the time or better. I wonder about the exposure to people internationally where they look at us and say, like in Australia and the UK and other places, we solved this problem and it still happens, but it doesn't happen with the frequency that it does here.
Yeah. Every time it happens, our response is to sort of say, oh, there they go again, those strange Americans. But you're saying it's happening a lot more than we even hear about, which is shocking.
I looked up the archive of gun violence and mass shootings.
Yeah.
On the 23rd, well, actually, so far in 2024, I'm looking at a page of what seems to be 20 to 25.
Wow.
There are 9 pages of answers, which puts it up near 220 items. And on June 23rd, there are 6 listings on the front page alone.
My God. That's horrific.
Yeah. Yeah, Vallejo, California, Winston-Salem, Columbus, Ohio, Tampa, Florida, St. Louis, Missouri, Rochester, New York.
Wow. So I think this is an important story. I now think it's a more important story than I did. Shall we move on to another?
Yeah, let's do another Chinese one. Tasting the Future Delicacy 3 Times by Bao Shu.
Okay. This is a story which has a little author's note about the title and alternative translations of the title. So it's not just us suggesting that something might be lost in translation. Sometimes the authors are debating whether their stories have been correctly translated.
I have the note here. Could you mind if I read it?
Oh, yeah, if you like, yeah.
Sure. In Chinese, I purposely use the title, and there's a series of characters, to express manifold meanings, such as taste delicacies 3 times, 3 kinds of delicacies, and 3 sections of an article about delicacies. And that describes the story really, really well.
Yeah.
It is extremely difficult to keep the manifold meanings in translation. The English translator of the story translated the title as Three Gourmet Delicacies, different from the previous offered translation.
You know what? I read that bit, then I read the story. I did not go back to that bit, but now I've heard you read that, I realise after reading the story I should have gone back to that little discussion. That reveals some subtlety to the story that I hadn't appreciated.
Yeah, I think it summarizes the story pretty well as well.
Yeah. So I've, in my attempt to just put a note down about what this is about, I wrote, premise, food-based virtual reality. The vicarious experience of eating delicious foods thanks to the technology of, I've called it flavor waves. I might have misremembered the term from the story, but there is some sort of named technology with a capital letter, something like flavor waves. This technology catches on, becomes more and more popular until the experiences of a Nile crocodile eating a baby bison whole is transmitted into the brains of dozens of customers who then more or less become Nile crocodiles in terms of what they daily desire to do or eat, because the flavor wave technology has somehow triggered part of their reptilian brains, bringing this behavior to the fore.
It is.
Now, that's summarized like that. It sounds absolutely ridiculous, and parts of it are, because my feeling with this story is that it is a satire. The only thing I'm not entirely sure on is what it is satirizing. It is satirizing gourmets. But how many of those are there in the world? And is it worth writing a story about that? So it made me think that, well, maybe the story is actually about something else. Maybe it's using that as the vehicle, but it's actually satirizing something else. But I couldn't figure out what the something else would be.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I've been trying to figure out what it is satirizing, because there's a great science fiction aspect to it, which is the ability to transmit the sensations of food and the enjoyment of food from one person or thing to another. And the story is presented in 3 different vignettes. In story 1, the person who invents the technology is looking for investors so they can develop it. In story 2, the technology is developed and widely accepted to the point where you can go to a restaurant and casually have this experience and pick the people who you follow. It's like, well, I like the way they eat food, and so I'm going to have that particular person sensations while I eat mine. And then I think it's story 3 where the satire really comes full fold, where people are so accustomed to that level of sensation that in order to keep their community engaged, they have to go to more and more extreme methods of feeling sensations. So it reminds me of social media.
Yeah.
Right? The point of social media is not to be social media. The point of social media is customer engagement so that you can feed them ads.
From the point of view of the people who run the social media, but from the point of view of the customer, it's enjoying interactions with those that you know and vicarious experience. But what the story gets at is this kind of collision of those two things. The need of the customer is one thing, the need of the people who run the social media is another thing, and those two things ultimately are in collision with each other. And there can come a point, as we saw with Twitter, where a significant number of people on that particular social media platform get fed up with it and go somewhere else. So I wondered if that's what this story was about as well. So it's interesting that you found that as a possible analogue or metaphor for what's going on.
I really enjoyed that progression. And in the fact that in every single step, people who use technology take it beyond a healthy or safe choice. So even in the first one, the inventor is courting this very rich investor. And so he provides him with this incredible food experience. And the investor is completely jaded at this point. He says, I've eaten it all. I've done it all. Food has no more enjoyment for me. So I'm really only here to give you a chance to do this. And he's presented with a helmet for his delicacy. And he's told, don't go beyond level 6. Don't go to level 7.
So what does he do?
He takes it. He goes through all 6, and I really appreciate the fact that the author translates all of these food terms, which I would not identify or understand in English at every single step, and so I was never ever taken out of the story by my lack of understanding of a pronoun or a word or anything else. It's all very well explained so that, me as someone that isn't Chinese can follow along with the story.
Yeah.
And so he goes like all the way to level 6, and level 6 was someone drinking water after they had gone through a desert. And then they go to level 7. And that's where the satire and the hook sets in. He understands that he's just experienced food by someone who was starving and has decided to commit cannibalism.
Yeah. Although I don't think it explicitly says that, does it? It says it sort of clearly enough for you to get that that's what's going on, but I don't think the word cannibalism is actually used.
No. He's in a war zone. He finds some burnt meat and he eats it.
Yeah.
And then vomits.
Yes.
Or the investor vomits.
That's right. Yeah. Like you, I thought the descriptions of the food were terrific all the way through. So it was a bit like having a menu in front of you where you're not only given the name of the dish, but you've got the list of the ingredients in the dish. It was a sort of a mouth-watering story, which I think is putting you in the same position as the characters in the story, which I think is really nice. I did find that a large section of the story was summarised rather than dramatised. And I mean, generally speaking, I favour dramatisation. I like stories which actually take you to a place and allow you to experience a thing, rather than just summarise a series of events. And this story mostly dramatises, but there's a long section in the centre which is summary rather than dramatisation. So that, to me, was a slight weakness. This is one of those that I think I will think of again and again, this story. And I can imagine myself in 10 years' time thinking, what was that story I read about food once? Because it makes a very strong impression on me.
Yeah, I enjoyed this story.
Yeah, me too. Shall we move on to another?
Let's talk about Better Living Through Algorithms by Naomi Kritzer.
Okay.
A new wellness app is going viral and helping people live healthier lives that are richer and more fulfilling. Does it really matter where the wellness advice comes from? That's a summary.
Very good. Very brief. Very to the point.
Yeah. I tried to... I wanted to keep it really brief because there's a lot of questions that this story brings up. The wellness app is suggested to our main characters through several different avenues, and she finally decides to give in, and it starts making all these odd requests. And over time, she finds out that she's healthier, happier, engaged in hobbies that she didn't used to have time for. She has a budget that she follows. She's taking mass transit instead of using her car. I won't say it's a perfect life, but it sounds a lot better than what she used to have. And then she gets her friend to try this app, and her friend is an investigative reporter. And the reporter asks, well, what's behind the app? And this is where the hook comes in. The app is an artificial intelligence. And now everyone is concerned that the app knows too much about you. It's influencing you in ways that they don't understand or like. I mean, even her boss suggests to all of their employees that they all use the app as well, because he's using it and he really enjoys it, until it's AI. And then it just all kind of falls apart. And what happens is that she loses a lot of the things that she gained. She stops doing her hobby. She stops walking as much. But then over time, because part of what this AI does is begin to build social networks of people with similar interests, the people begin to reestablish those communities because of the things they had lost through the app and begin to do it on their own. And for her in particular, it's about art.
The weirdness of the story is that it's the app that is driving people's behaviour. And although they sort of turn against the app, mostly what the app has done is actually done them good, and they've carried on doing the things that the app was getting them to do, but they're doing them independently of the app, and they don't need the app anymore. So it is again a kind of a commentary on social media, but it's a bit like if Facebook caused us to enjoy being in the company of our friends so much that we put down Facebook and actually spent time with our friends in real life. It's that kind of thing. Overall, I wasn't sure whether the story was anti-app or not. It seems that the characters end up in a good place at the end, and they're only in that good place because of the app. But along the way, they've abandoned the app. They don't need it anymore. So I'm not sure whether it's pro the app's existence or anti-app.
Yeah, and one of the things I struggled with is, as an engineer and a computer scientist, I'd like to believe that I understand the difference between true artificial intelligence, like Vicky from the iRobot movie, and the large language models that we're using now to write papers, to evaluate things, to summarize things.
Yeah.
This app appears to be truly artificial intelligence because, at least for the large language models that come out today, they will lie to you.
Yes.
And tell you things which are factually incorrect.
Yeah.
And I don't think that software is capable of producing the kind of positive change that is described in the short story, which makes it science fiction.
But you can imagine that, another generation or two, and the software might be getting to that position.
It's possible for sure, yeah.
So I wasn't too bothered about that aspect of it. What I liked about this story is it really drew me in at the very beginning. The descriptions of the way people were engaging with this app was also very, very real. The kind of the addictiveness of it, the contagion of it. It mentions Wordle in passing. That was a contagious app. Some of us still do Wordle because we're still hooked on it. And one of the things that this app does is that it gets users to phone up other users and talk to them.
Yes.
And one of the characters, I think the central character, is sort of horrified. What? You have to use your phone as a phone? And I think that's just so spot on, so that the whole first section really drew me in. I kind of came away thinking, this has not really told me anything that I didn't know. The story seems to be saying at the end that you should be doing these things without the technology, and we all know that, but it's very engaging all the way through.
I don't talk about my work very often. So I work for a print-on-demand board game company, which means we will take content from anybody and print it and format it into a game and then send you back something that looks like what you would buy in a department store or your friendly local game store.
Right.
And one of the games that we made, and I think we still make 8 years ago, is called Rejection Therapy. And it gamifies the process of people dealing with the fear of rejection by a series of prompts and cards that you work with on a certain schedule that you set up yourself so that you aren't so afraid of rejection.
Right.
And I think that's exactly what this app is doing for people that are afraid of interpersonal contact, whether from normal fear or from the pandemic when we were all shut in for so long, is that it leads the person through this. Well, first start with this, and then you're going to get a phone call. Don't be afraid of the phone call. It's someone from the app who's just like you. And then eventually we're going to ask you to make some phone calls and participate in these forums to talk about what you're doing. And then it just happens in the real world on your own.
It kind of makes me think the hidden programmers behind this app, they seem to have what's good for humanity at the centre of what they do. Although they're creating a piece of technology which intervenes and bosses people around and all that kind of thing, it's for the good of people, ultimately. I don't know if that's true of most social media or even most apps.
Yeah, I'm guessing there's some level of altruism that's going on, but in the end, to be successful, you have to be huge, and to be huge, it takes a lot of money, and to make money, you have to make compromises on your altruism, unfortunately.
Yes. Every now and again, you get a science fiction story which discusses an issue or a social problem, or, well, not necessarily a problem, but a social trend, and can make a really good discussion point where you're not discussing the story so much, you're discussing the issues that the story flags up, and I think this is a really good one. It's one of my favourites of the six that we've read here.
Yeah, me too. Well, and I think that brings us to the sixth story.
Which is?
Now, I'm going to say this correctly. How to Raise a Kraken in Your Bathtub by P. Jellycart.
No. It's How to Raise a Kraken in Your Bathtub.
Oh, maybe I'm from the north of England or north of the UK.
Yeah, that would be it, yeah. Interestingly, this one's from Uncanny Magazine, and they give you an audio version of the story, and they introduce it as How to Raise a Kraken, and the reader of the story, I think, refers to the Kraken all the way through. So, yeah, it's a Kraken, isn't it?
Kraken.
We all know it's a Kraken.
Yes.
Let me try and summarise this one. This is, I think, a quite delightful tale set as it emerges in Victorian London. And it's about a man who, well, he considers himself to be ambitious, and he orders what turns out to be a kraken egg to hatch out in his bathtub. And of course it grows rapidly and it escapes into the city, and he hires some mermen to track the kraken down. But it turns out that the whole business of getting people to grow krakens in their bathtub is being run by a professor who has an ulterior motive of kind of bringing down Western civilization. So our poor hero, who I think he's dead by the end of the story, isn't he? Doesn't he get killed by the kraken?
I think he gets killed by one of the mermen.
Oh, yeah, probably so. So we can't really say he learned his lesson, but I think we learned the lesson of not filling in these little coupons in the back of magazines that say "send off now" for one of these. Now, did you get the references?
Yeah, I think I did.
Yeah.
And I love because I tried to write summaries for many of these stories, and I completely failed on this one because there are so many different levels. You did a great job of describing the face story.
Yes.
And one of the hooks in the story is that the antagonist is Captain Nemo.
Yeah. From 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yeah. Although this Captain Nemo is a slightly reinvented one. They're from a subjugated India.
Yeah.
And he has partnered with the mermen to try and throw off their Victorian English oppressors.
Yeah.
And his preferred method of doing that is by taking advantage of the greed of people in Victorian England, including our hero, who is really more of an anti-hero.
I suppose he is, yeah. So technically then, that means that this story, it ties into the world of Captain Nemo and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. But the idea of him being an Indian prince, I believe that comes in Mysterious Island, which is the second Jules Verne novel to feature Captain Nemo. I think in 20,000 Leagues, his background isn't really explored very much. But in Mysterious Island, he's revealed to be an Indian prince. And that information is given to us in a kind of a sideways means within this story. So this story is kind of operating in parallel to those Jules Verne stories, which I think is clever. Do you think this is a complete story? Did you get to the end and think, I'm satisfied? Or did you think, oh, it's finished?
Well, yeah, I saw it as an indictment about greed and a patriarchy.
Okay, because I got to the end and I thought, oh, I want more. It had satisfactorily resolved things. I think there's something about when you read a story on a website, you're not quite conscious of where the end is. When you're physically holding a book, you know how many pages are left. And when you're on a Kindle or whatever, it gives you a percentage indicating of how much you've read. But when you're reading something on a web page, it just scrolls and scrolls and scrolls until it ends. And I think with this, I wasn't prepared for it to be finished. So when it suddenly got to the final line, I thought, oh, it stopped. I really enjoyed this story. I thought it was clearly written, good, old-fashioned, traditional storytelling, very visual, very dramatised. Kind of a framing device to the story as well, because we start off with a conversation in a pub, and then the main story begins, and then every now and again our hero or anti-hero comes back to the pub and has another conversation with his friend. I think the whole of the way through the story we know exactly what's going on. So when we get the unlikely elements coming in, the main one of course is the existence of krakens, but then these references to Captain Nemo, which are carefully doled out to us in a series of clues, which I guess some readers won't get because they won't have the reference point. And I think the story still makes sense even if you don't get that reference point.
Yeah.
I just think this is so beautifully crafted.
Now, I do wonder whether or not the Kraken in this story is the one that takes down the Nautilus at the end of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. That would be an additional layer of irony on top of everything.
Ooh. I don't remember the ending of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Well, at least in the Disney movie, I think he's taken down by a Kraken.
Is it actually called a Kraken in that film, or is it a giant octopus?
Oh, it might be a giant octopus. Yeah.
We'll have to go and watch that film now and read the book.
Well, we should point out, this is the 2024 Locus Award winner as well.
Oh, is it? Right.
Yeah.
So this must be a strong contender then for the Hugo.
If I were to guess the ones that are going to win this year, based on how the Rabbit Test did last year, I think we're going to see The Sound of Children Screaming win, and it will be followed by How to Raise a Kraken, and then either Better Living Through Algorithms or one of the Chinese science fiction pieces.
Interesting. To be honest, if I were voting, I think I would put Kraken in first place. So this is my ranking. This is definitive now, until 5 minutes from now when I change my mind. But I think I would put the Kraken story in first place. I think I would go for the Naomi Kritzer Better Living Through Algorithms in second place because of the enjoyment of the story and the kind of well-roundedness of it. And I think I would probably put The Sound of Children Screaming in third place. And then Answerless Journey probably next. I'm going to put Mausoleum's Children at the bottom of the list. And that means that Tasting the Future Delicacy 3 times is going to be second from bottom for me. I think that's my ranking. Don't ask me to repeat that because I can't.
Yeah, my rankings, my personal rankings, I think would be very similar to yours. I might rank Answerless Journey. I wish I understood it better to say that it was more than just a vignette.
Yeah.
Like you said, I wonder if something is being lost in the translation. I will point out that I don't know who Alex Woodend is. It's possible that person is fully fluent in Chinese and English.
Yeah.
But I think the translation in Tasting the Future Delicacy 3 times is better.
Yeah. So, those are the short story nominations for the Hugos. We'll put links to as many of them as we can on our website, which is 101sf.blogspot.com. All of the English language stories are available online for free, so we can give links to those. The Chinese ones, I haven't found any free online versions, so we're unlikely to be able to provide any link to those, but you might be able to find them in some publication somewhere, some print publication. And the Hugos are given out in August?
About a month from now.
Yeah, so in a future episode, if we remember, we can reflect back on what the actual ranking is. Anything else to say on any of those, Colin?
At some level, I enjoyed reading all 6 of them, so I think they're great works.
Yeah, and there's a lot of variety in there as well, which I really do appreciate. Do we have a quiz of any kind?
We have something like a quiz.
Oh.
On YouTube, speaking about social media and other things, my family has been watching highlights from the Lateral podcast by Tom Scott.
Oh, yes.
Are you familiar with this?
I am.
Do you read it or listen to it regularly?
No.
Okay. So, and I'm probably stepping. This is not exactly a quiz, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you a sentence.
Okay.
And that sentence is a puzzle.
Oh.
And your job is to figure out the elements of the puzzle so that it's the full story of this is well explained.
Okay.
You are free to ask questions. This is more of a dialogue that's going to happen where you would like ask questions about, is it close to being this? Is it close to being that? Is this other thing that I'm thinking about related?
Right.
So let me read you the phrase. And then I have a series of hints I can give you should you ask them. And then any question you ask me back about this, I will do the best I can to answer without giving away the answer.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Here we go. Some have claimed that Sylvester saved his companion's life by swearing.
Can you read that to me one more time?
Sure. Some have claimed that Sylvester saved his companion's life by swearing.
By swearing. Okay. So I can ask any questions that I like?
Yes.
Okay. Is Sylvester Stallone?
No.
Oh. Is Sylvester the cat?
No.
Is Sylvester McCoy, the Doctor Who actor?
Yes.
Oh.
So there's a science fiction tie-in. And so I loved it when you went with Stallone because he's been in science fiction movies.
Right.
And then like Sylvester the cat. Okay, left turn, but no, he's coming back. This is good.
Give me the sentence again.
Some have claimed that Sylvester saved his companion's life by swearing.
Now, Sylvester McCoy was the Doctor Who, and Doctor Who has a companion. So maybe the suggestion is that he saved his companion. So who would his companion be? Are we looking for the name of an actress?
We're more looking for the concept of how the phrase I read would happen.
How it would happen.
Yes. The companion is Ace, played by the actress Sophie Aldred.
Yeah. So then that leaves the sort of the mystery over the swearing. So what could that be referring to? Swearing. Are we talking about something that was said by the character, but some viewers misinterpreted what was said and thought it was more of a curse word than was actually the case?
No.
Okay.
In fact, I could tell you that this episode was not seen by viewers.
Does that mean it was heard by listeners?
No.
Oh. Not seen by viewers. Why would it not be seen by viewers? Was it cancelled?
No.
Was it written but never filmed?
No.
Was it filmed?
It is possible. It's probably not relevant.
Okay. I'm totally stumped by this. I'm not sure where I'm supposed to go.
Okay. Let me try and give you a hint.
Okay.
So we know it involves the Doctor. It involves the production Doctor Who.
The production Doctor Who. As opposed to...
It didn't happen in a novel or a comic book. It happened in real life.
Okay.
And this is a real world event.
Yeah.
But it may not have been part of any plot or story that was written.
So is there some ad-libbing involved?
Yes.
There's some ad-libbing involved. Did something happen during the filming of a Doctor Who episode which caused Sylvester McCoy to swear?
Yes.
And it was cut out of the episode?
Yes.
Because it was swearing and had no place in the episode?
Well, Doctor Who, I don't believe he swears at any time.
Fair enough. So the actor swore, and this was just before a scene which showed the death of Ace?
No.
No.
But you're very close to that.
Really?
It's right concept, but wrong context.
I can't imagine what it could be.
Ace really wasn't in danger.
Right.
Sophie was.
Oh. So, we're in a BBC studio, let's say, and they're filming a scene, and a lamp falls from the overhead gantry, and Sylvester McCoy says, "Oh, look out, Sophie." And she narrowly avoids being killed by a falling lamp.
That is almost exactly the scenario.
Oh my God.
Although the particulars are slightly different.
Okay.
There was a scene where she was in a large container that was slowly filling with water, and Sylvester McCoy realized that the walls were starting to bulge, and he was afraid that something was going to happen to Sophie, and because he didn't want her to be cut by falling glass or anything else, and so he swears, and he does this knowing that it is so out of character for Doctor Who that everyone notices immediately what's going on, and they can take care of the problem.
Brilliant. And you know what? I think I have heard that story before.
Oh,
I think I have, but without the context, I never was going to get there.
Oh,
that's brilliant.
Yeah, so there are 220 of these little vignettes that are shown.
Yeah.
So yeah, the podcast, I haven't watched the full podcast. I've only seen these vignettes. There are 4 people on like a Zoom call, and one person is the quiz master, and the other 2 people are trying to guess. And the discussion from how they go from these vague phrases to finding an answer is really enjoyable to observe. So not a quiz per se. I didn't depth the knowledge of your trivia about other kinds of things or make you guess. I kind of made you guess, and I had a nice sci-fi tie-in. So it was the first one that we had that was in that way, and I really enjoyed it.
Terrific. You don't have a round 2 of this, do you?
No, I did not know how long this process was going to take. And it's the only one that was science fiction based.
I so wish it had been Sylvester the cat, though. So shall we move on to some past, present and future?
Yes.
I've got a past item here, which is, it's yet another John Wyndham.
Oh.
Since our last episode, I read Chucky. It's better than I expected. I'd always imagined that Chucky was written for children, and it's mainly because I've actually seen children's editions, and there was also a TV series in the 80s or 90s, which was a children's TV series. So I've always assumed that Chucky was for children. I don't think it is. It has a child as a central character, and so that, I think, is why people have seen it as being suitable for children, but it's not really written for children. And it's got some nice tie-in with the Chrysalids and some other John Wyndham stories. It is quite a cosy story, a sort of a middle-class family setting. But it's quite good. It's about a child with an imaginary friend who may actually be an alien trying to make contact. So it's quite a nice story. So if you've ever wondered whether it's worth reading Chucky, I say it is worth reading. But it's not quite as dramatic as Triffids or Midwich Cuckoos.
Yeah, that reminds me of something I've watched.
Chucky, perhaps?
No, I haven't seen Chucky. And it reminds me of the Star Trek The Next Generation episode. There's a young actress who's now popular. Her first name's Kristen. She was in the Spider-Man series.
Yeah, I think I know who you mean, but I can't remember the name.
Yeah, she plays a little girl in the Next Generation episode who has an imaginary friend who is an alien.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
The alien gets her to go and do things to learn about the Enterprise that she shouldn't do. And there's this long process of coming to the realization of, why are you doing this to the little girl? And
you're absolutely right. That episode does exist. I can't remember what it's called. I'm guessing that whoever wrote it had seen Chucky at some point, or read Chucky, because there are some similarities there. I've got one other past item, and in a way I'm pleased it is a past item, and that is Star Trek Discovery has now finished forever. I sound a bit gleeful in saying that. So I've watched every episode of it, always wanted it to be good, but quite often been disappointed with it. The final episode is okay. It's sort of standard Star Trek fare. It kind of shows that the people who made it do know how to do Star Trek in the sort of traditional sense. It's not a brilliant final episode, but it's okay. And it has a sort of a weird tacked on ending. You get to the end of the story and then the episode carries on for about another half hour because the cast and crew thought they'd finished shooting the season and would be back for another season a year later, but then they all get phone calls saying, oh, Paramount have cancelled Discovery, so we're going to go in and film a finale. So they film this extra, like, half an hour of material that gets tacked on at the end.
Wow. I guess it's nice that they did get to try and wrap up the series, because so often they're just left in the state that they are.
Yeah, I agree with that, yeah.
I have a couple of present items. Actor Donald Sutherland passed away at the age of 88.
Oh, yeah.
And he has done a lot of science fiction. He did Space Cowboys, he did The Hunger Games, he did Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah.
There are a couple of other movies that I didn't name that he was also in, but it kind of feels like the end of an era in a way.
Yeah.
And then I have a short present story to share. It turns out, for my other podcast, Take Me to Your Reader, we wanted to try and do the story The Absent-Minded Professor, and that was remade by Robin Williams in the 90s as the movie Flubber.
Yes.
And it is based on a short story written for a magazine in 1943. And Seth and James and I, we're fairly accomplished at using a search engine and other websites, and we have found almost every piece we have ever been wanting, except for this one. And the story is called A Situation with Gravity.
Right, yeah.
And we tried the Internet Archive, we tried Google, we tried other things. We just could not find the original movie or the one book it was anthologized in, from 1996. And so after playing disc golf with Seth and James, I got a bug and went to the library. And I described the situation to the librarian. And the librarian, in 3 days, using resources that I have absolutely no access to, sent us a PDF copy of this story so that we can read it and then use it for our podcast.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And I was completely blown away by her effort. And I'm thinking about, you should never send a podcaster to do the work of a research librarian. For our listeners, if there are things you're trying to find, you have questions, go talk to a librarian. One, it doesn't happen very often. Most of what they do is check out books and help people find things.
Yeah.
But when they get to dig their teeth into a nice, thick, meaty topic to find things, I feel like they'll totally go the distance for you.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the magazine? Do you remember?
Liberty Magazine, the May 23rd, 1943 edition.
Okay.
The Internet Archive does have several decades of Liberty Magazine, but they don't have any, I think that's correct, they don't have any of the May issues.
Right. Okay, now I've got I'm calling this a present item because I'm prompted to talk about this because of some recent things that have come up in the news. One of which is this claim that generative AI is now capable of writing essays that will pass at university level. Now, this is something I did several months ago, and I think I mentioned it on the podcast, but I didn't go into any detail, I don't think. But I got into a kind of an argument with ChatGPT because I was looking for a factual piece of information, and you would think, wouldn't you, that an AI would be able to find facts more easily than anything else. Now, what I was trying to find out is, where does the phrase "the shape of things to come" from? It's the title of an H.G. Wells book, but it feels like it's from a quotation. To call your book "The Shape of Things to Come," it makes me think somebody else said that before he did. So maybe it's Shakespeare or whatever. And a search, though I try, I couldn't find any reference to it anywhere of where this came from. So I went to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT told me this, and I quote: "The title, The Shape of Things to Come, was originally used by H.G. Wells for his 1933 book, which is a work of science fiction, blah, blah, blah. The phrase is a quotation from Act 4, Scene 1 of William Shakespeare's play Julius Caesar." And then it carries on for a whole paragraph describing the scene. And you're supposed to be satisfied with this answer from ChatGPT. And the average student is going to be satisfied with that, and they will copy and paste it into their essay. However, I went and looked up Act 4, Scene 1 of Julius Caesar, and the phrase is not there. So I say to ChatGPT, "Are you sure this is correct?" ChatGPT replies, and I quote, "I apologise for any confusion caused. My previous answer was incorrect. H.G. Wells got the title, The Shape of Things to Come, from a line in Act 5, Scene 1 of his own book, The War of the Worlds, 1898. The line reads, and then it gives a long quotation from The War of the Worlds. And again, the quotation does not include the phrase, the shape of things to come. And there's also an alarm bell in there, because he says, Act 5, Scene 1. The War of the Worlds is a novel. It doesn't have acts or scenes.
No.
So it goes on, blah, blah, blah. And so I go back to it. I know this is definitely wrong. So I say, are you sure this is correct? Where is the exact quotation referred to? And ChatGPT replies, and I quote, I apologise for the confusion. My previous answer was incorrect. H.G. Wells actually got the title The Shape of Things to Come from a line in the last chapter of his 1933 book, also titled The Shape of Things to Come. The exact quotation reads as follows, and again, there's a quotation. But the quotation from the book does not include the title. So I say to ChatGPT, but this passage doesn't include the quotation, does it? So what does ChatGPT say? It says, quote, I apologise again for the error in my previous responses. Every time I read one of these, I hear the voice of Hal from 2001. I'm sorry, Dave, I can't allow you to do that. So there's the apology. Then it says, you are correct that the passage I provided does not include the exact quotation from The Shape of Things to Come. After further research, it appears that the phrase, the shape of things to come, was actually coined by Wells in a letter to his friend Elizabeth Held, in which he wrote, I am going to write of these things, the shape of things to come. This was before the publication of the book with the same title. And it carries on for a couple more paragraphs. So then I think, this could be interesting. This could be useful to me. So I ask, when did he write the letter? And ChatGPT gives me the exact date of the letter. So by now, of course, I'm extremely suspicious. So I ask, what is your source for this information? And it says, quote, my source for this information is the book H.G. Wells, A Biography by Norman and Jean Mackenzie. The book cites the letter from Wells to Elizabeth Held, dated 14th of December 1932, as the earliest known reference to the phrase the shape of things to come, and its use as a book title. Now, that gives me a specific place to go and look, and it gives me a specific citation, it gives me a specific date. I never actually got round to looking that up, so I didn't fact check that final fact. But based on its track record of lying through its teeth, I don't expect that to be true either. So there's a number of lessons here. As you said earlier in this very podcast, generative AI lies. It makes stuff up. The second thing it does, it apologises in a very polite way, in such a way that you think, oh, nice ChatGPT, knowing that you've done wrong. It's like good dog. ChatGPT rarely cites its sources, and if it does cite its sources, you better go and check those sources, because it's probably making them up or quoting things entirely in the wrong context. And then you read that ChatGPT is now capable of passing university-level exams. I don't think that ChatGPT would get past me as a marker of university essays, because I double-check every quotation, every citation. So I think if generative AI is as advanced as people are now saying, I'd be surprised. Also, it means that obviously essays are no longer a valid means of assessing people. So instead of panicking and saying, oh my God, what are we going to do about this AI? We should be saying, what are we going to do about this method of assessing people? It clearly doesn't work. So that's my present item.
Wow. Yeah, Hank Green characterized the modern ChatGPT large language model kind of programs as next word guessers.
Yeah, that's right.
They're really good at understanding English, because it gave you the kind of answer that you wanted to hear.
Absolutely.
But it completely made up stuff 3 times in a row, and maybe a 4th.
Yep. And its apologies are so sincere And it's precisely because it knows which word needs to come next in forming an apology. Oh, it's amazing. And on a similar note, generative AI, of course, can do artwork as well, and it can do music. And I got it to write a theme tune for our podcast. So have a listen to this.
Science Fiction 101, where did we go wrong? Caught between the circuits, now we sing our tragic song. Futures told in silver screens where holograms collide. Science Fiction 101 with nowhere left to hide.
Oh.
What else have you got?
I'm afraid that's all I have this time.
Oh, okay. I've got one more present item, which is a really nice resource, which is called, strangely, Yet Another Science Fiction Textbook. And this is an online thing from Jason Ellis, who is a professor of, I guess, English literature and who teaches science fiction. And he's basically put his entire science fiction course online for anyone to have a look at. So if you've ever wondered what things fascinate academics who study science fiction, it's worth taking a look. So I'll put a link to that and all the other things we've discussed on our website. Are we done?
I think we're done this time.
I think we're well and truly done. Thanks for listening, everyone. We're Phil Nichols and Colin Cuskey, and our theme music is from Purple Planet. Don't forget you can find us on all the usual podcast platforms, including YouTube, although you'll only find us in audio there, no visuals. But please like, share, subscribe, give us a positive review, all of that stuff, and we'll see you next time.